All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm so pleased now to present our next speaker, who is going to share some of his wisdom and experience in our neighbor to the north. Rémi is a scientific coordinator and a national park employee at the Quebec Park or regional park, the Quebec Park that many of you might have heard of before, Mont Mégantic. Mont Mégantic Observatory has a storied history for a number of reasons, including that it houses the largest mainland observatory in Canada on a reasonably remote mountain near the city of Sherbrooke, which has a population of 200,000. So it's about a 5 or 6 hour, 5-hour drive north of here. You can go visit Mont Mégantic and see Rémi's work, where over the past several decades, he has turned what was a terribly light polluted area where the astronomers were fighting against the city of Sherbrooke into the world's first dark sky reserve, and convinced hundreds of thousands of people to dim the lights, to change the lights from horrible bright blue lights to much dimmer amber lights, worked with lighting companies, worked with all the local municipalities, worked with scientists of all kinds. And today, Rémi is going to share with us a particular perspective that has been cropping up very recently, a problem that's been cropping up recently, which is the new problem of greenhouses shedding their light upward into the sky through glass roofs with abandon, with no concern at all for anything but what's inside the greenhouses. And we tapped Rémi because he's been focused on this problem in a way that we don't have that local expertise here in Massachusetts. We hope to develop it, and we're going to start with Rémi's talk today on greenhouses, a growing threat of light pollution. Rémi, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this great introduction. That means I don't have to spend too much time on the background. Yeah, I'm gonna focus more on the light pollution from greenhouse, but just to give you a sense of where I am and where I've worked with, where I've worked in the last, as you said, 2 decades. It's in Mont Mégantic. So you see here the view from the International Space Station. You can, of course, recognize the Boston area with Cape Cod. And just north of Mont Mégantic, if you go straight north, you will have Quebec City. And going straight west, you have Montreal, where you have approximately 4 million people. So Mont Mégantic is in this darker part. This is where there's also the Mont Mégantic National Park, and as James mentioned, the Mont Mégantic Observatory. And just on the left of this darker region, you can see the city of Sherbrooke, which is in the top 10 largest city in the province of Quebec. So almost 200,000 people. Just again, to give you a little bit of the background, creating the Dark Sky Reserve, I was not directly involved at that time. I was working at the Astrolab, which is our museum at Mont Mégantic. But I've, of course, followed closely the creation of it. But we have 3 main axes to build the Dark Sky Reserve. So, of course, raising awareness about light pollution. And this is still an ongoing effort. I think we are still at the beginning of this awareness that we need to raise in conservation of the night. But that was very important for us at the beginning, of course. We also put regulation in the region for outdoor lighting, and this is key to a part of what I'm going to show later in the presentation, is that it was for outdoor lighting and not indoor lighting, and also the conversion of many light fixtures outside, more than 3,000 at that time, and many thousand more after that. But just to create the Dark Sky Reserve, we changed 3,300 light fixtures, approximately half and half of public lighting and private lighting also. And here you have a map of the Dark Sky Reserve, which is centered on the Mont Mégantic, and you have the little outline for the Mont Mégantic National Park. Most of you might recognize the World Atlas of Light Pollution. So you kind of see the amount of light pollution that we have. We are lucky because we are with part of the border of the Dark Sky Reserve is also the US and Canada border. So we have northern Maine mostly and the northern New Hampshire that are our neighbor on the south, and this is quite dark, so we're lucky for this part. And most of our light pollution comes from the west, mainly Sherbrooke, but also towards Montreal. And it might seem weird to put a city like Sherbrooke inside a dark sky reserve. And I might correct James a little bit for his introduction. The goal was not to work against Sherbrooke, but with Sherbrooke to lower light pollution. And it's been a great success. So it's not all perfect in Sherbrooke, but I see more and more good practices in the region. I live myself in Sherbrooke, so I can see all those good lights that are installed or replaced. To focus more on the topic of the greenhouse, the first time I experienced light pollution from greenhouse, I didn't even know it was that at first. I was traveling in Iceland, and this is a picture I took just on the road, and I found it weird because there was those very, very strong lights shining into the clouds, and I could not see any big cities on the maps. And it's just when I went like very, very close to those sources that I could see that it came from greenhouses. That was not a problem that I was aware before. It is logical that this amount of light that is used can create so much light pollution, especially with the glass panels. But it's not something that we had in the region, so I was not like expecting to see this kind of things. And then I kind of forgot about it because, as I said, it was not an issue for us locally. And it became almost one in 2018 when there was a project to build a very large cannabis greenhouse. So it came just after the legalization of cannabis in Canada. And of course, they chose a town with a name like Whedon to install it. Just because of that, just because of the name, they thought, yeah, that would be nice. So that was a 1.1 million square feet for a greenhouse, so very large. And except being in a dark sky reserve, so Whedon is part of the dark sky reserve, it's on the border, but still, we didn't have anything about light pollution from greenhouses in our regulations. We do have like quite strong regulations for the outdoor lighting, but nothing for greenhouses. So, and I mean, when the small town had this like big project put in front of it, they rolled the red carpet, and those were huge investments for such a small town. So we were trying to say, well, you know, there's a dark sky reserve, there's an observatory, there's all those efforts that we've done like for the last 15 years. What do you plan to do to mitigate maybe light pollution? And they were evasive a little bit. They said that they would address it, but they didn't give any specs about the materials they're going to use and things like that. And the communication was quite hard. And luckily for us, I'd say, a couple of years later, the pharmaceutical behind that was almost going bankrupt, and they dropped the project. So that was a big relief for us, just to have dodged this bullet. But it brought the problem on our radar, and we saw that there was really a perfect storm ahead of us. I mean, there was new technologies for building greenhouses, but also for lighting them, especially with LED. There was, as I said, the cannabis legalization in Canada. There is now discounts on the electricity rates, huge discounts and subsidies for lighting from the national energy provider, Hydro-Québec. And there is also, and that cropped up during the pandemic we talked a lot about the food and groceries at the beginning of the pandemic, but there were new policy to increase the food self-sufficiency with subsidies and incentives. So, and the government of Quebec want to double the area of greenhouses in the province. So this, as I said, is a kind of we can see where it's heading. And to give you an example, this is images from satellites, and you can see one greenhouse, a large one, but just one, south of Montreal at Sainte-Clotilde. And you see the picture in August when the lights are off, and in September when the light goes on. So you see this huge light that just flash in this satellite image. And these are starting to appear for the last decade here in Quebec. So you have Montreal, Quebec on the top right. And so you see all those, and not all of them are there because this is just for last October. And since the satellite goes ahead above us around 1 a.m., they're not always lit at that time, but you can see that there is more and more. And I think this view, while it does show you some light pollution from greenhouses, it doesn't give you the scale of the problem. And for this, I used the map, but I built a 3D map where the height is the intensity or the radiance that is seen by the satellite. And this is what you can see. So this is from November 2020. You can see Sherbrooke, the observatory, so the dark sky reserve. You see Montreal. As I said, there's almost 4 million people over there. And so the height, so like the hills that you can see colored, this is light pollution. So if you're in Montreal, I mean, you don't see a lot of stars, maybe 100, 200. You see the moon and the planets, but on a SQM, you might be at 17.5 approximately. And look at those peaks of brightness from the greenhouses. So it's just off the charts. It's nothing compared to what we're used to as for the amount of light pollution. This is another 3D data visualization that I did. This is for, you can see one greenhouse near Drummondville, and you can see pictures taken from the highway. Another picture here that I saw recently in the media, 15 kilometers away from the greenhouse. So it's a huge problem. And people are starting to complain, of course. Neighbors of those greenhouses, they see it, especially in the region in Ontario around Kingsville and Lexington. You have this huge growth of different greenhouses, and you can see how the light pollution has increased in the last year. So this is what we're trying to avoid. And some of those lights are very unnatural because they are using more and more LED, which are most often purple because they're using blue and red, which is better for some plants. And as I said, you can see like the complaints from the neighbors are just piling up. The cities are struggling to do something about this, maybe put some regulations in place, but it's often very hard to act on it after the harm is done. When the greenhouse is built, if it's not built with proper shielding and blackout curtains, well, it can be extremely expensive to do it after. Maybe the greenhouse is not built to support all this added weight. So I think it's very important to be ahead of this wave. So just a few pictures to show the amount. So these are just pictures that I took from some different articles online that I could find. One that got a lot of attention in the last year here in the province of Quebec is more north from here, north of Quebec. It's the Lac Saint-Jean, so it's a very large lake. And there's a cucumber greenhouse that is growing over there. And there, people are really complaining. There's a Facebook group with 1,300 people on it, and they're just posting pictures of it. They did a petition to try to lower light pollution. They're trying to work with the municipalities to have some regulations so something can be done. So they are really struggling, of course. And I took a measurement on one night. I remember they were complaining a lot, and that's the first time that I heard about this greenhouse. And I just took a single pixel above downtown Montreal, and as you can see, the level is at like 200. Well, you can forget the units, but basically 200, and you have 20,000 for a pixel over the greenhouse. So it's just a huge amount of light pollution. And so the Facebook group, as you can see, they are sharing all those pictures. They're sharing drone pictures. So the amount of light is incredible. Video that I think it's very interesting. You can see geese going over, and they were just like circling around the greenhouse. So Jane talked a little bit about bird migration. This is, of course, one of the impacts of light pollution, and it's very well shown in this sad video. And there's even memes that are popping up, so like this one. So when you forget to close the curtains near the tundra greenhouse. And they are growing. So the phase 1 that you see on the bottom right, this one has absolutely no curtains. Phase 2 has some shading curtains. They're not made for light pollution. It's just to do some shades from the sun. And Phase 3 does have blackout curtains, but they are growing, and they've announced recently all those projects for the future. So yeah, it's a problem that is growing, and people are noticing. And fortunately, there are solutions. So every time I talk about a problem and about light pollution, I try to come up with solution, and this is what I try to find. And I'm not the only one. I mean, the industry itself is adapting. So with more and more greenhouses that are built, that are lit, there is also a push to be better neighbors, and to lower our impact on the environment. So the main way to do it is using blackout curtains. So you see them on the top. These ones are dark, but they are often white, or they can be silver to reflect some of the light, which means that it's better for the grower. All this light that will be spilled outside normally, it's kept inside, which is better. It also traps more heat, which can be a challenge for the grower, but in our northern climate, it's often very positive, because it means that you have to spend less on energy to heat the greenhouses. So this can help you on the return on investment to put those kinds of shades. And as I said, if you look into the industry magazines of greenhouses, you see more and more of people speaking about mitigating light pollution from the greenhouses, and that the main way to do it is the blackout curtains. We do have some good examples here in Quebec. There's Lufa Farms that build greenhouses on top of large buildings in Montreal. And so for the fourth greenhouse that they built, they were already using blackout curtains to counter light pollution. And here in the Dark Sky Reserve, on top of the Bishop's University, which is in Sherbrooke, there is a small research greenhouse, and the person that is responsible for this from the beginning, from the design of the greenhouse, she wanted to put blackout curtains, because she was well aware of the problem of light pollution, and she wanted to mitigate it. There's also a small observatory just on the building beside, and these are some drone pictures that we took with the curtains open, and you can see with the same exposure with the curtain closed. So it's not perfect. You still have some light leaking on the corners and things like that, but it's still much better. And Bishop's University is also all lit with either older HPS or more and more, and I'd say it's probably like 90% of it now, amber LED. So this is one of the good examples that we have in Sherbrooke. And so having them to do this on the greenhouse is very great, especially because the building just beside it, there is these are residents for the students. So here you can see with the curtains when they are closed. I also did measurements inside of it, and the light levels were going 15% up with the curtains closed. But it does introduce some problems, and mainly with much more humidity, because it's the temperature goes higher, the plants will sweat more, so you have higher humidity. So there is a need to have some ventilation and things like that. So this is something that we have to keep in mind when we are trying to mitigate light pollution by putting curtains. We also have to give a little bit of room for the growers to be able to work with this, because if you have more humidity, that can lead to mold, and this is of course affecting the yields and the revenue of the greenhouse. So we're trying to find a balance between lowering light pollution but still allowing the greenhouse to operate. Here you have another view. So I think it speaks for itself. You see the difference is quite striking. So for us, the Dark Sky Reserve, that meant that we needed regulations. We needed to update our regulations, because we already had something for outdoor lighting, but nothing for indoor, and in that case, greenhouse. I've looked on a lot of existing, well, I'd say a lot, there's not a lot of them, of regulations elsewhere in the world. The Kensington, Kingsville and Lexington area were working on something when I started to look on it. There was a few places I remember in Oregon and California. Netherlands was probably the one with the most mature regulations. So I looked at everything that was done and tried to come up with something. As I said before, the blackout curtains, both on the walls and on the roof, were very important. But still, you needed to have the right kind of curtains, not just to say, oh, put curtains, because like this example where they have some curtains, but it's probably shading curtains, so it's not really working. And this is from the greenhouses that I talked before near Lac Saint-Jean in Quebec. So you can see the difference between no curtains, shading curtains, almost no impact, and the blackout curtains. So the exposure is much lower than another picture that we saw before, but you can see that the impact is quite strong with blackout curtains. And there is curtains made specifically for this that will block 99.5, 99.9% of the light, that still allows some humidity to go through those curtains. So these are all the kinds of things that we need to think about when we are looking for regulations. This is something that I found for the Netherlands. It's a bit more complicated because they will separate between small greenhouses, big greenhouses, how much they're lit, and things like that. So I wanted to try to keep something simple, but that was still a huge inspiration for me. And I've touched a bit about this, but to me, to put forward a new disposition in the regulation, it was important to strike a balance. As you've seen, the amount of light pollution is so huge that we really need to lower it. So it's not like cutting it by half. It's not cutting the 3/4 of it. We need like to go way beyond 90% just to have something at least that is manageable. So sufficiently strict because of the amount of artificial light, but we still need to allow greenhouse operation. We don't want to prevent any greenhouse to come into the region, because, well, the region will want some economic growth from this. And I mean, I don't want to start a war with the agriculture ministry and things like that. So we need to be strict, but it needs to still be manageable. You need to understand the grower's challenge. As I said, it's mainly heat and humidity. Also, not being so restrictive. I didn't want to say like, oh, you have to cut 100% of the light pollution, because then not only it's hard to apply, as you've seen, there's light leaking, but it's also easy for the industry to discredit this regulation. They will say, well, that's just impossible. So, I mean, your regulation is bad and it's not, that's not realistic. And being simple enough to understand and also to enforce. Municipal inspectors don't study in lighting, and they don't study in greenhouse operations. So you have to find something that is quite easy to measure and understand. And also being somewhat economically realistic. So the cost of installation versus the return on investments with energy savings and things like that. So this is all something that we can keep in mind when coming with the regulations. I see there's a question. Maybe I can wait just for the end. I'm almost at the end of the presentation, so I can answer the question from Laurie. And so this is what we came up. We were already in the process of updating our regulations for some little parts of the outdoor lighting. So for Granite and Haut-Saint-François counties, which are covering like 90% of the dark sky reserve, this was the first version when I came up with. So basically, greenhouses that are using indoor photosynthetic lighting must use vertical and horizontal blackout curtains to limit light leaking outside. And they also need to respect the points that you see on the right. So the blackout curtains, what I came up with at first, they must cover a minimum of 95% of the walls and 98% of the surface of the room. So by going with the surface instead of trying to measure light, it's much easier with a picture or just visually to see if you're covering the surface. This is also during the lighting operation. So if they shut the light, they can, of course, open the curtains. and between sunset and sunrise, because that's quite easy to know when the sun is set or when it's rise. These are hours that can be programmed. It's easy to find. No lamp shall be visible from the outside, just so that it's only reflections that can leak, and no lamps directly. The opacity of the blackout curtain must be of a minimum of 99%. So that's easily achievable if you're using the right product. You have the spec sheets that you can verify. And also all the interior lighting devices must be fully shielded. So this is to, at least, as I said, not send light directly through the different leaks or gaps, and to concentrate the light towards the plants. When we put the regulation in Sherbrooke, in fact, it's in the process of adoption. It's not already done. Sherbrooke is much bigger, so there's more bureaucracy and things like that. We were challenged a little bit about some terms, especially coming from the MAPAC, which is the agricultural ministry in Quebec. And basically, we've just changed a few things. So instead of speaking about blackout curtains, we talk about blackout systems, just to allow some different means, maybe future means. We also simplified with 96% of the surface for both the walls and the roof. So this is to allow some gapping again. And from the different information that I gathered from growers and things like that, it seemed that they were able to work more easily with like 4% during the whole night, instead of having periods of like, you might have 10%, but just after midnight and things like that. So it's easier for them to have a small amount to allow the ventilation with the top and the outside. We also put a little exception for the fully shielded light if it's intra canopy, which means these are most of the time like LED tubes, but they are under the canopy, inside the plants. So you're already blocking most of the light with the leaves from the plants. And this is not feasible to use fully shielded lights in those cases. So we added this. So these are things that we could probably change it to in granite and Haut Saint-François regulations. But it's not been challenged yet, and it does take some time to work with the regulations. But this is what we came up with. For now, I'm confident with this. It does set an example. I know of 2 other municipalities in Quebec and another region that have already adopted almost a copy-paste version of those regulations. And my hope is that it will work to limit light pollution. I know it's not perfect if we're just looking at the light, but I think, as I said, it does strike a balance. And so I'm looking forward to, maybe not see greenhouses, but at least to see a more responsible way to grow inside those greenhouses. So thank you very much. I've put some handles from the Dying Twitter and also Mastodon if you want to reach me. And there's also our website on meganticdarksky.org, where you have a lot of information about the dark sky, but also good lighting practice in general. So thank you very much, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you so much, Remy. That was fantastic. It's just what we need. And did I understand correctly that there was a question online from on the chat from Lori Friedman? Is that true? Lori, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much for your presentation. That was excellent, and I really appreciate that. I live in Beckett, Massachusetts, and we have a facility that is being proposed to be built, which is much smaller than what you have experienced in Canada. It's a 31,000 square foot greenhouse, a tier 11, which is the largest tier that Massachusetts allows. It's 100,000 square feet. And the proposal of the applicant, they are agreeing to have 0 light leakage from the greenhouse, which, according to your presentation, seems almost impossible to be 100%. I don't know how they're going to achieve that. That's one thing, and I have a second thing.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe I can just start with this one. I think probably depends on like what they are going to use. They might aim for 0% light leakage, but that would be like building something that is like with real walls and a real roof. If they are using curtains, they just mechanically they will always have some leaks. They even if they use like 2 layers of curtains, I personally don't think it's achievable. It's a good thing to aim for, but there will always be some leakage. I know there is some cannabis greenhouses that need to do light deprivation of the plants, and these often so they need to put the plants into darkness during the day. So they often use real walls, and they only like change the things on the for the roofs. So these will probably give better results. And I mean, like the 96 or 98% that we've put, they are like the max, well, the minimum. So if they want to go beyond that, I mean, that's fine. But probably it will depend on what they are growing and the well, just working with reality. So, but it's a good thing if they aim for 0 light leakage.
Well, that's a good point. If they're working with reality. I want to ask you, do you have any suggestions about security lighting around a cannabis facility? Because we are requesting that, well, all outdoor lighting shall use motion detection LED full cutoff lighting, but we're also asking them not to exceed 1/10 of a foot candle at any location. And they will not agree to 1/10 foot candle because the bylaws of my town in Beckett, they allow 1 foot along property lines and 10-foot candles for any location on the property, because they're saying that the applicant is stating any less lighting would have a negative effect on security. So we're trying to give them a proposal to what they can and cannot have on the properties for light pollution.
And you said you were aiming for 0.1 foot candle, is that right?
We're asking them for point 0.1, between 0.01 and 0.1, which is typical, but the bylaw of my town says that they will not exceed 1 foot candle along property lines or 10-foot candles for any location on the property, and any light poles that are new or existing may not exceed 10 feet in overall height. So my main concern about this facility is about light pollution around it, 31,000 square feet.
I'm more used to work in lux instead of foot candle, but it's just like a 1 to 10 conversion. So 1 foot candle is about 10 lux. I did I did a guide for lighting in national parks here in Quebec, and I was aiming more towards something similar to what you are using. Like, I mean, close to 1 lux, maybe 5 lux, so 0.1 or 0.5 foot candle. In the regulations that we have in the DarkSky Reserve, which are touching 34 municipalities, the perimeter of a building, the maximum that they can use, and I've just looked it up, is well, it's the average of this for maybe like a 5 meter or like, what is it, like 15 feet around this is we put it at, and we've been working with that for the last 15 years at 10 lux, so about 1 foot candle as a average for this area. The entrance, they can go to 30 lux, so about 3 foot candle. So I'm just telling you what we've used with. I think that aiming for 1 lux, if you were like in a national park somewhere like very dark, you don't have that much people, I think this is feasible. But I think if you are in some place where there is more people, the feeling of security is important, because, well, I don't want to go too deep in that. This is beyond my presentation, but even if more light brings more security, a minimum amount does bring a sense of security, a feeling of security for people, which I think is important to respect and understand.
Well, this is a remote neighborhood.
Okay.
In the
Well,
Berkshires. It's
Okay.
very
Well, if it's a remote place and something that I think you can aim lower, but I think that like 0.1 foot candle, fully shielded, with motion detection, I think that's very, very low. So it's probably why you're being challenged with this. And so this is why you might want to put some water in your wine and find a good balance. Already having motion detection.
In the interest of time, I'm just going to take two more. Kelly had a response he wanted to make also, and Mike Person, I see that your hand is up, and then we'll go on to our break and then our closing session.
Yeah, Lori, I'm going to follow up with you one-on-one, but I encountered a guy named Paul Salou who had a greenhouse that he built in Shirley called Little Leaf Farms.
Yeah.
That had all the worst aspects of what Remy showed there. And he retroactively installed curtains. I went out to visit it and I could not tell that it was a greenhouse standing in the parking lot. So I think 100% is achievable. And he said, I spoke to him later and I'll connect you with him. He said that any greenhouse constructor who doesn't install curtains is just not paying attention.
Yeah, definitely.
All
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it should come there. As I said, there's a lot of incentives and subsidies right now, and in my view, they should come with the like the restriction that you need to put like curtains. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And one final question from Mike Person.
Thanks, Remy. That was a lovely talk, although some of your figures were horrifying. I was wondering if you could comment at all on their economic incentives. It feels like if you're blasting more light than downtown Montreal into the sky, that's light you're paying for. And they should have a strong economic incentive to keep all that light in their house where they want it.
Yeah. Yes, there is. I think that, and I've seen it with the large greenhouse near Lac Saint-Jean. The first one they built, the first phase, they had no curtains. Then they put some shading curtains. Then they put some blackout curtains, and they will keep blackout curtain for the next one. So I think the industry is learning. I think but I mean, if they have preferential rates for electricity, then the incentive to keep light inside is not as good. And I know that this greenhouse often don't respect the schedule of the preferential rates, and they will just pay the well, it's not well, they have like I don't, sorry, my English is not always very good on the Saturday, but yeah, they will have a penalty to pay for, and it's just more economical for them to pay for the penalty. So I mean, yeah. So one good thing is is not just keeping the lights, because that will give you like maybe 15, maybe 20%. I don't know. It depends on the greenhouse, but I've measured 15. I think 8 is much more a bigger saving that you can do. I've seen numbers around 70-75% of savings that you can do on heating if you are using something like sodium HPS light, because it will produce some heat. If you're using LED, it will be a lot less, but because you are spending less to heat basically with this. Yeah.
Remy, thank you for this excellent talk, presentation, and opening our eyes, as it were, to this new problem that we have here in Massachusetts as well. As you can see, we have several people who are already fighting the same fight, or shall I say, working with the same constituents, as you corrected me earlier. So,
well, for the greenhouses, it's it's maybe a little bit more against.
Well, we'll do whatever we need to, but we're so appreciative of you spending your time and sharing your expertise with us on this Saturday. Thanks once again.
Thank you. Thank you.